guys, welcome back to the second video of how to be successful in your career series. In this particular video, we're going to be focused on the aspects of interview, how you should behave, how you should answer questions, and so on. So let's get right into it. Now, the first topic that I'd like to address is expectations. And what I mean by that is, what are the expectations of the person who is interviewing you? Now, I've listed a few here. These might be common sense to you, but you're surprised how many people actually don't follow all of these. The most important ones that I've outlined are being on time. You have to come prepared to an interview. You have to be a subject matter expert. So that means you need to have technical skills in the position that you're applying to. You should be professional, very well spoken, and try your best to leave some first impressions. So ideally, you want to be able to differentiate yourself from the rest of the people that are getting interviewed so that you stand out and have a chance at the position. All right, so I'm going to focus this presentation on 4 key tips that I can give you in terms of how you should present yourself and the material you should be discussing during an interview. The very first tip is the most important one, and that's to prepare customizable examples in support of 3 main scenarios. Now, I've picked 3 scenarios here. You could have 5, 6, 7. It's easier if you can create 3 scenarios that apply to everything. And the ones I've outlined here are conflict resolution, multitasking, and teamwork or independent work. So basically, in these 3 categories, you can demonstrate to the interviewer your ability to solve a bunch of situations. For example, in conflict resolution, you can show how you're able to work under pressure, how you're able to analyze situations and come up with the solutions quickly. In multitasking and teamwork, you can show your organization skills, how you can create a plan of action, how you can prioritize projects based on resource availability of resources, time, and money. And then teamwork, independent work, pretty much every single company is looking for that. You have to be able to, work effectively with others and have really good research capabilities to work on your own and, provide presentations, draft research reports, and so on. So I'm going to go into more detail into each one of these points in the further slides. Now, point number 2 is know your resume inside out and be prepared to expand on any topic. So again, this sounds common sense, but some people actually have a lot of things in the resume, but when you ask them about the particular job experience, specifically something very technical, they're gonna, blank out and say, oh, I don't remember, I'll have to think about it. That will make you look really bad. So make sure you know everything in your resume. Tip number 3 is research the company or institution's mandate or primary objectives, find out current challenges, and think of how you can propose a solution. So what this is for is about that expectation of first impressions. You want to be able to leave a very good impression, and the way to do that is to come prepared. So if you can look up the company that you're applying to and see what's the purpose, what kind of work they conduct, and what type of challenges they face. I mean, it might not be listed on their website, but you can research the industry they're in and you can kind of figure out standard challenges for that domain. You can bring that up in your response to questions, and they're going to be very impressed. I've done this a few times where I've gotten a chance, and they really remember me by that. And number 4 is pay close attention to the essential and asset qualifications and work experience of an application. So you can tell your responses based on these requirements. Now, what I mean by that is every single position will have 2 set of criteria: asset qualifications, where you can basically, they're not a necessity, but if you have them, it's in your best interest, you have a higher chance of getting the job. And then essential, where you have to have every single one of the qualifications or you're going to be eliminated from the competition. So when you provide responses to whatever questions you're being asked, always try to incorporate elements from the experience and qualification requirements that are listed in the position. Because if let's say you get asked to talk about, some design of a specific app, and then in your responses, you provide experience related to something else aside from design of apps, it may work for the question, but it's not ideal. It'd be best if you can kind of match the question to an equivalent experience. All right, so I'm going to go through each one of these into more detail, and let's go on for the next slide. Moving on to tip number one, preparing customizable examples. Now, as I previously mentioned, I've broken this into three different categories. The first one being conflict resolution. So under conflict resolution, there are multiple things that you can address. So number one would be you can explain how you're solutions oriented. So nobody wants to hire someone that just constantly, complains or has issues. They want you to identify the issues, but also propose a solution. So always keep that in mind. Point two would be touch upon your problem solving skills, how you make best use of available resources. So again, this shows that you're not a helpless person. When you have an issue, you don't go start asking everyone questions. You first try to see what you're currently given, what's available, and can you come up with a solution based on this, before you go and ask others. And point three is show consideration for problems at hand and willingness for flexibility. Again, in this case, it's basically saying when there is a problem, you're not just going to discount it or, oh, this is not affecting me. You're showing that you're taking the problem seriously. You're willing to listen what the problem is, and you're flexible in kind of understanding where the other person or where the issue is coming from, and you're looking for solutions together. Okay. So moving on to multitasking. For multitasking, again, you can identify a number of items that kind of suit your personality and how you can solve this issue. So the first one is identifying a plan of action, and that's everybody wants to have an employee that's well structured. So every single time you have something to do, you put it down on paper, you create a plan. How am I going to reach part A, part B? How long will this take? Do I have enough resources to complete it, and so on? Bullet point two is discuss how you manage to prioritize the tasks. So this is just key prioritization work. Again, something super important, and you can bring up prioritization and other examples under teamwork or independent work, not necessarily in the multitasking, but you should always use this word in an interview, that you prioritize constantly when you're dealing with multiple projects. It's something that is the first thing you do when you create your plan of action. And sub-bullet point three is touch upon your ability to work well under pressure. Again, this is a standard requirement. Most positions will ask you to, give an example when you worked well under pressure. So make sure you have something ready and prepared, and you're well understand how to explain this and how it fits in this context of either multitasking, or was it an example under conflict resolution. So these are very flexible. That's why I say these are customizable examples. You can include multiple parameters on each one. And lastly, you have teamwork and independent work. So a few considerations for this would be, one, give an example of how you worked effectively and efficiently in a team environment. So pick a project that's ideally from your recent experience, something that's has a great importance on a bigger scale, and then explain how you took initiative, coordinate, and distribute activities within the team. So it's not enough to say, like, I work well in a team environment. It's ideally you want to say you like to take initiative in projects. You like to listen to your coworkers, all their plans of action, and then you can using your organization skills, you can basically facilitate discussions and brainstorming sessions, and put things on paper, distribute different types of objectives to each one, and kind of work cumulative to achieve that final goal. And the last point is explain how you consider everyone's opinions when proposing solutions. So again, based on what I was previously saying, you have to be very considerate in a job. So it's not like, oh, I know this solution, or I think my solution is best, so I'm going to discount everything else that doesn't sound remotely close. You have to be the guy that's saying, that's a wonderful idea, Mike. That's a wonderful idea, Jenna. You have to write everybody's opinions, put them down, and highlight the strengths of their opinions, see what can be taken out of. And then together you can say, This is a great idea. However, there are limitations. Every single option has a limitation. There's no such thing as something that's flawless without a limitation. So when you put it all down, then everyone can see exactly where the strength of their proposal is and where the weakness is. So you'll have a much easier time to work in these team environments if you do this. Hopefully you find this useful, and we can move on to tip number 2. All right, guys, so under this tip, what can I say? You should really, really know your resume. It is super important. And if you don't, you can face some really awkward situations. So the first consideration is to go over the most recent experience examples and be prepared to speak on behalf of each. All employers really care about your past 2 years experience, or something that's within the past 5 years, but assuming it's relevant to the position at hand. So make sure that the examples you formulate in tip number 1 under those 3 different categories fit a recent experience, okay? Sub point 2 is check to see which skill set, experience, programs from your resume best relate to the job at hand. So again, this is it's meant to target your focus. So instead of saying, oh, I need to know 10, 15 different things about my last job, you can basically highlight 3 that they relate a lot to the current job that you're applying to, and make sure you know those 3 points really well. So this is in case you don't have all the time in the world to study everything about every single experience. At least you have solid understanding of the most important ones that relate to the job. And lastly is put an emphasis on experiences that made you stand out. Example of initiative, problem solving, conflict resolution, multitasking. So this is what I was saying, and their tip number 1 was, it's practically you need to focus on examples that make an impression. So these things, problem solving, conflict resolution, multitasking, are things that employers always look for. And if you're managed to incorporate them in your responses, you're really going to stand out. Some people don't really do this. They just respond based on what they're thinking. They're not really structured. But trust me, if you organize yourself, if you organize your thoughts, and you kind of get a way with get like a system down and responding to questions, you're going to be more consistent, you're going to be more fluent, you're going to be more coherent, and very well spoken. So it's always going to leave a good impression. All right, let's move on to the next tip. All right, so under tip 3, you basically have to research the company's mandate or objectives. As I mentioned in the summary slide, it's important to familiarize yourself with the company's mandate ahead of time, and then practically try to narrow down on the objectives and challenges your particular division that you're going to be working in are currently facing. So sometimes this is not very easy to do. So you'd have to do some background on the particular industry you're in, or maybe talk to some friends that are, in the domain. So any information you can get can help you build up a solid understanding of the current challenges the company is facing, and then you can ask about these during the question period or bring them up in the response to questions. Like there's always ways to bring these things in into any sort of discussion, and it's really going to impress the interviewer that you've done a lot of background research on the company, you're aware with type of work they do. Normally that's the kind of their job to tell you a 5-minute blurb on what's going on and where you'll be working. But if they see that you've already done all that work and you're up to date, not only that, but you're aware of challenges, and then in the last point you're ready to propose suggest a plan of action. It doesn't matter if it's like super realistic or it's actually feasible. What matters is you took the initiative to go through all of this, and they can even see your kind of mode of action, like your mentality behind it, how you put things together. It's really going to give a good impression and increases your chances of passing the interview. All right, so moving on to the last tip, we have essential assets and experience. Now, as I previously mentioned, in every single job application, you have 2 sections, one with essential criteria and one with asset criteria. And this is both for qualifications and experience. So things like, what programs you know how to use, if you're effective at communicating in the both official languages, you know, in the work environment, or what kind of work experience you have. So make sure you meet the essential criteria for both work experience and qualifications. That is absolutely a must. If you, for some reason, don't meet the essential criteria, employ some of the skills that I taught you in my very first video, where you basically kind of self-teaching yourself using tools on the internet or as a YouTube, so that you have some sort of knowledge or some experience on that particular bullet point. Never say I don't meet this criteria, because if you do that, you might as well say goodbye to that position. So second sub-bullet is incorporate elements from these requirements in your response to any question. Now, what this means is you can always give a you know, particular answer based on your experiences, but it's always better if your answers is tailored based on the requirements of that job, because that's what the employer is listening to. That's what they want to find out about you. Always think about this. There are some people, and there'll always be someone else that is actually doing that. There's always somebody better than you, and they're giving answers exactly that are needed to be heard. So you want to make sure you can compete with the best, not just any other person. You want to make sure you're competing with that person that's better than you. So keep that in mind. And point number 3 is try to make an impression where possible and include elements from the asset criteria. So asset criteria is something that not all of us can easily achieve. It's an asset there. It's put there for multiple reasons. Primarily, it's for employers to eliminate, you know, applicants. If there's too many applicants, they can exercise, you know, either 1 or 2 of the criteria under the asset experience, and then just eliminate anybody who doesn't have that criteria. So if you can include the asset experience requirements in your responses, it's going to leave even a better impression than before. All right, so to end my presentation, I just wanted to give one final tip. I know it's not part of the core 4, because this is, again, something that it's kind of like an expectation, but I really wanted to put a slide on just this one tip, and that's to know your audience. And I've listed here 3 sub-pointers. One is always be aware of the personality and tone of the interviewer. Try to match their style and careful of your lingo. And the reason I mentioned these is I've failed a few interviews because of this one point. So one was the personality and tone of the interviewer. My domain is science, and a lot of the interviewers have been, you know, well-seasoned scientists that are very calm, quiet, and you know, they don't really match, or I don't match their tone. I'm particularly, I like to talk a lot. I'm much louder. So I've noticed that we weren't really, that there was no connection between us just because of this one point. And then the careful of your lingo. I typically used some of these business terminology in discussions, and I've actually asked for feedback in one of the interviews that I failed, and the feedback that I got was that you know, Valentin is using too much business lingo in a position that's, you know, related to science research. And I was kind of surprised. I'm like, what exactly does it mean by that? But just always remember, think of who you're talking to, and try your best to kind of match their kind of the ambience, the vibe that you're getting from that particular employer. Sometimes, of course, it's always good to be yourself. Enthusiasm, initiative, excitement, it's always something seen as positive. But anyways, try the best to know your audience. All right, guys, thank you very much, and I'll see you guys in the next video. See you.